The moment my father screamed, "You're no daughter of mine," and my mother tore up the check that was supposed to fund my future, all because they discovered I was in love with Hallie, my world shattered. What they didn't expect was that this betrayal would ignite the fire to build an empire from absolute zero, with the woman they despised standing as my unbreakable partner. Rain hammered the windows of our suburban Chicago mansion that Tuesday evening. I had finally told them the truth after months of secret late-night calls and hidden weekends. "Veronica, this is not who we raised," Dad roared, veins bulging in his neck. Mom just sat there clutching her pearls, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "End it with that girl, or you're finished. No more tuition, no trust fund, nothing." When I refused, when I said Hallie was the only person who had ever made me feel truly seen, the cutoff was instant and brutal. They changed the locks on my childhood bedroom that same night and froze every account with my name on it. I stood on the porch in the downpour, suitcase in hand, dialing the only number that still mattered. "It's done," I whispered when Hallie answered. Her voice stayed steady even though I could hear the fear underneath. "Come home to me, V. We've got each other." Home was our cramped one-bedroom in the city where we'd been quietly living together while I finished my business degree. By the time I arrived, soaked and shaking, Hallie had already cleared space on the tiny kitchen table and brewed cheap coffee. We sat on the threadbare couch eating dollar store ramen, and the reality sank in like a stone. 24 years old, privileged my entire life, and suddenly I had $43 in my checking account and a mountain of student loans my parents had promised to erase. Hallie wrapped her arms around me, her blonde hair tickling my cheek. "We start over. Your app idea, EmpowerLink, the one that connects women facing discrimination with real mentors and microfunding. It's brilliant. We make it real." I wanted to believe her, but doubt clawed at my chest. Every memory of family vacations in Aspen, of my father's proud handshake at my high school graduation, replayed like a taunt. Had I thrown away everything for love? Was I selfish? The questions kept me awake until dawn while Hallie slept peacefully beside me, her hand still holding mine. The next weeks blurred into survival. I applied for entry-level jobs only to watch doors slam because my last name carried weight in Chicago finance circles and my parents had already made quiet calls. Hallie worked double freelance graphic design gigs, coming home with ink-stained fingers and exhaustion in her eyes. We pawned my grandmother's watch for rent. One night the power got shut off, and we sat in the dark eating cereal by flashlight. That was the moment the fire truly lit. "They think they broke us," I told Hallie, voice raw. "We're going to prove them wrong." We registered the company the next morning with $50 and a dream. I coded the basic platform at night on my cracked laptop, while Hallie designed the clean, empowering interface. Our first investor meeting was a joke, an older man in a suit who laughed outright at two girls with no capital and no experience. Walking out of that glass tower, humiliation burned, but Hallie squeezed my hand. "Their laughter is fuel, V. Let's burn brighter." Yet every victory felt hollow, because the phone calls from my mother never stopped. "Come home, apologize, date a nice boy from the club. This phase will pass." Each refusal carved another scar. I started questioning everything. My choices, my love, my worth. Hallie saw it in my eyes and pulled me close on the nights I cried. "You're allowed to grieve what you lost, but don't let them steal what we're building." By the end of month 3 we had a working beta and our first 20 users, all women who wrote testimonials that made me tear up. The rent was still late, the fridge still empty most days, but something unbreakable was forming between Hallie and me. We had traded luxury for truth, and in that small apartment the future began to feel possible, even if the path ahead was littered with landmines I couldn't yet see. 6 months later we scraped together enough to move to a shoebox studio in Brooklyn because New York offered better startup networks, and we needed every advantage. The city swallowed us whole, but we refused to drown. I spent 14-hour days cold calling potential mentors while Hallie redesigned our pitch deck until her eyes crossed. Our first real breakthrough came from a small women's foundation that gave us a $5,000 grant, enough for a real server and basic marketing. We celebrated with cheap wine on the fire escape, toasting to the women who believed in us when our own families didn't. But success always came with shadows. My father's old golf buddy sat on the board of a major VC firm and quietly blacklisted us. I learned this when 3 promising meetings suddenly canceled. The betrayal stung deeper because it proved my family wasn't finished punishing me. One evening Hallie found me staring at my phone after another rejection. Tears I couldn't hide. "They're still trying to control you from 3 states away," she said softly. "Don't give them the power." Inner conflict raged louder than ever. I started having nightmares about my mother's disappointed face, waking up gasping and reaching for Hallie. "What if they're right?" I whispered one dawn. "What if I ruined my life for love?" Hallie didn't flinch. She cupped my face and said, "Love isn't a ruin, V. It's the reason we're still standing." Her certainty became my anchor. We faced our first major confrontation when my cousin Sarah showed up unannounced at our Brooklyn door. She had always been the golden child, engaged to a hedge fund guy. "Your parents are worried sick," she hissed. "This lesbian phase is destroying the family name. Come back, go to therapy, fix yourself." I stood taller than I felt. "This isn't a phase. Hallie is my wife in every way that matters." Sarah left in tears, but not before snapping a photo of our tiny apartment and texting it to the entire family group chat. The messages that flooded my phone afterward were vicious. The startup kept growing despite everything. We hit 200 users and landed a tiny angel investor who believed in the mission. Hallie and I work side by side at the same desk, shoulders touching, turning pain into code and design. Yet the moral weight pressed heavier. Every time I chose to post our story on social media for marketing, I risked more family backlash. Was I exploiting our struggle or owning it? The question haunted me during investor pitches when I had to decide whether to mention my personal motivation. Then came the first real betrayal. Our early beta tester and supposed friend, Jenna, leaked screenshots of our private text to a conservative blog. The headline read, "Disowned Heiress pushes LGBTQ agenda with startup." Comments flooded in calling us frauds, calling Hallie a gold digger. I watched Hallie's face crumple when she read them, and something inside me cracked. That night I held her while she cried for the first time since the cutoff. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this war," I whispered. She wiped her eyes and answered, "We chose this war together, and we're winning it." We tightened security, doubled down on the product, and watched user numbers spike from the controversy. The price was exhaustion and doubt, but also a fierce clarity. By the end of year 1 we had a functional app, a waiting list, and the unshakable knowledge that every scar was forging us into something stronger. The road ahead still looked impossible, but for the first time I believed we might actually make it. Year 2 brought the move to a real office, a shared WeWork space in Manhattan we could barely afford. EmpowerLink crossed 1,000 users, and media outlets started calling, curious about the disowned heiress turned founder. I gave interviews carefully, never hiding Hallie but never flaunting either. The balance felt like walking a razor wire. My mother left voicemails begging me to attend my sister's wedding as the old Veronica. I deleted them all. The pressure peaked during a late-night coding session when Hallie found me sobbing over old family photos I'd saved on my phone. "I missed them," I admitted, voice breaking. "Even after everything, I miss Christmas mornings and Dad's terrible jokes." She sat beside me in silence for a long time before speaking. "Missing them doesn't make you weak. Choosing yourself doesn't make you cruel. You're allowed to feel both." That conversation became the turning point. I realized grief and love could coexist without canceling each other out. Investor prejudice surfaced brutally at our first big pitch to a prestigious firm. The lead partner asked point-blank, "Are you two involved? Because we need to know if this is a serious business or a lifestyle project." The room went ice cold. I felt Hallie stiffen beside me. I answered calmly, "Hallie is my partner in every sense, and that makes this company stronger, not weaker." We walked out without the check, but with our dignity intact. 2 days later a smaller fund reached out, impressed by our refusal to hide. Family sabotage escalated when my father quietly bought shares in a competing app and leaked negative reviews. The blow nearly sank us. Cash flow dried up. We maxed out credit cards and ate rice and beans for weeks. Hallie got a second job designing logos at night while I took on freelance consulting. Exhaustion turned us snappy, and for the first time we argued, really argued. "Maybe I should go back," I shouted one night. "Maybe they're right and I'm destroying us both." Hallie's eyes flashed. "If you walk away now, you walk away from me too." The silence that followed was the scariest moment of my life. We reconciled on the roof at 3 a.m., city lights glittering below. "I'm terrified of losing you," I confessed. "And I'm terrified of becoming someone who regrets choosing love." Hallie kissed my forehead. "Then don't become that person. Stay and fight." That promise became our new foundation. Slowly the tide turned. A viral thread from a user whose career we helped launch brought in organic growth we couldn't buy. We hired our first employee, a brilliant coder who believed in the mission. The inner conflict never fully left, but it stopped paralyzing me. I started therapy on a sliding scale, learning to carry the guilt without letting it steer. Hallie and I grew closer in the fire. Our love no longer just passion but forged steel. By the end of year 2 we had secured seed funding, modest but real. The $1 million dream still felt distant. Yet every late night, every argument resolved, every user success proved we were building something that mattered. The price had been steep, but the woman beside me made every sacrifice feel worth the fight. Year 3 tested every limit we thought we had. EmpowerLink crossed 10,000 users, and we finally moved into our own small office in Soho. Investors circled, smelling money, but many still carried the same prejudice. One prominent VC told me privately, "Great story, but tone down the personal angle. Focus on the product." I refused. Hallie supported the decision even though it cost us a 7-figure term sheet. "We built this on truth," she said. "We don't sell it now." The moral dilemmas grew thornier. A major media conglomerate offered a partnership if I agreed to a rebranding interview where I downplayed my relationship. The money would have solved everything. I stared at the contract for 3 nights, weighing the future against my integrity. Hallie never pressured me. She simply waited. In the end I tore the offer in half on her desk. "I won't hide you for any amount," I told her. The relief in her eyes was worth more than any check. Betrayal came from within our small team. Our head of growth, someone we trusted for 18 months, sold inside information to my father's lawyers. They tried to freeze our accounts on a technicality from an old family loan I'd forgotten about. The court battle drained us emotionally and financially. During one deposition my father sat across the table and said coldly, "This is what happens when you choose that lifestyle." I walked out shaking but didn't cry until Hallie held me in the elevator. That night we lay awake talking about the real cost. "I never wanted to drag you through lawsuits," I whispered. Hallie traced circles on my arm. "You didn't drag me. I chose every step. And I choose it again." Her words became armor. We won the case, but the victory tasted bitter. Success continued anyway. A feature in a major business magazine brought waves of new users and speaking invitations. I flew to conferences while Hallie held down the office. Distance tested us. Late-night calls sometimes ended in tears because missing each other hurt more than the work. Yet every reunion reminded us why we fought. Inner awakening happened gradually. I stopped checking my family's social media. I stopped apologizing in my head for loving a woman. Therapy helped me reframe the narrative. I hadn't lost a family. I had gained the freedom to build my own. Hallie watched the change in me and fell in love all over again. "You're becoming the woman I always knew you could be," she said one quiet Sunday morning. We closed a bridge round that kept us afloat, but the real $1 million horizon still shimmered just out of reach. Every obstacle had sharpened us. Every doubt conquered had strengthened the bond between us. The story was far from over, yet I could feel the tide turning in our favor, even as new storms gathered on the horizon. Year 4 arrived like a freight train. EmpowerLink hit 50,000 users, and serious acquisition talks began. We flew to San Francisco for meetings that could change everything. Hallie and I stood on the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset, wind whipping our hair, and made a pact. No matter what happened, we would never hide again. The biggest investor yet, a legendary firm, wanted exclusivity but demanded I reposition the company's origin story without mentioning my disownment or my marriage. The term sheet was for 8 figures. I sat in the hotel room staring at the number while Hallie waited patiently on the bed. "This is the moment everything we sacrifice pays off," I said. "Or the moment we sell our souls." She simply asked, "Which version of you do you want to wake up as tomorrow?" I declined the deal the next morning. The partner's stunned face was almost worth the lost millions. Back in New York, the backlash from my family intensified. My sister called crying, saying Dad had cut her allowance too unless she publicly denounced me. The guilt nearly broke me. I spent 3 days in a fog, questioning every choice that led here. Hallie refused to let me spiral. She booked a weekend away in the Catskills where we hiked and talked until the knot in my chest loosened. You can't carry their choices, she told me under the stars. Only your own. Then came the near-fatal blow. A former college friend I'd trusted with early funding details leaked doctored financials to the press, claiming we were insolvent. Stock in our small round plummeted. Banks called loans. For 48 hours we thought the company was dead. I sat on the office floor surrounded by empty coffee cups while Hallie paced. We've survived worse, she said, but her voice cracked. That was the lowest point when I truly wondered if love had cost too much. We fought back with transparency. I wrote a raw LinkedIn post detailing every struggle, every family rejection, every late night. The response was overwhelming. Users rallied, new investors reached out. Media wanted the real story. Within 2 weeks the narrative flipped. Our valuation actually rose on the wave of authenticity. The moral awakening solidified then. I understood that every painful decision had been necessary. Choosing Hallie wasn't just romantic. It was the foundation of everything authentic in my life. The price, though enormous, had purchased a version of myself I could respect. A final term sheet arrived from a firm that respected our values. The number was life-changing. Closing was scheduled for the following month in New York. Hallie and I stood in our now bustling office looking at the signed papers and knew the moment of truth was coming. We had built this together from nothing. Now the world would finally see it. The morning of the closing I woke before dawn, heart hammering. Hallie was already dressed in the crisp white blouse I loved, coffee ready. Today we tell the whole truth, she said, kissing me softly. I nodded, fear and pride warring inside me. The conference room at the law firm overlooked the Hudson. Sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Lawyers, investors, and press filled the seats. Cameras rolled as I signed the 8-figure acquisition papers that would make EmpowerLink part of a larger platform, while keeping our mission intact. When the final pen stroke dried, the room applauded. The lead investor shook my hand. Then I stepped to the microphone they hadn't expected me to use. Before we celebrate, I said, voice steady for the first time in years, I want to introduce the woman who made every single day of this journey possible. My co-founder, my partner, and my wife, Hallie Thompson. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Hallie walked forward, eyes shining, and took my hand. Cameras flashed. I saw the exact second the live stream hit my family's phones across the country. My mother's face would be on every news site by evening. My father's empire of control had just been publicly dismantled by the daughter he disowned. The questions came fast and furious. How does it feel to go from cutoff to co-founder of $1 million exit? I answered honestly. It feels like justice wrapped in love. Every rejection, every doubt, every sacrifice led here. And I wouldn't trade a single one. Hallie spoke too, her calm strength shining. We built this on truth when lies would have been easier. That's the real success. Later, alone in our apartment, we watched the coverage together. My phone stayed silent, no calls from Chicago. The silence said everything. I felt the final severance like a clean cut, painful but necessary. Hallie pulled me close on the couch where we had once eaten ramen in the dark. We made it, V. From zero to this. I looked at the woman who had stood beside me through every storm and knew the price had been worth it. I had lost a family that demanded I erase myself, but I had gained a life built on honesty, a thriving company, and a love that had never wavered. The journey had broken me and rebuilt me stronger. In the end, was choosing love and authenticity over family approval the right decision, or did I destroy too much in the process?